Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first lecture, the day one lecture. It is going to cover the human body and just anatomy in general. So let me get my slideshow going here, play from the start. All right, so what you're going to want to do at this point is open up your course manual, and you will see day one, chapter one, the human body and orientation, and you'll see that there's blanks that need to be filled in and whatnot. And what you'll do is you will use this note packet to answer the questions on the drag and drop activity and to answer questions on your concept check quiz tomorrow. So anytime you take notes, you will have a concept check the next day. And that's because I've had students in the AP Bio Distance Learning fourth quarter say, when I take notes, I don't want to do the concept check the same day. I want to review over it and I want to sleep on it and then take it the next day. So I wanted to honor that request, and I thought that was a fair request. So that's how we will do that. I will pause anytime I think that you're needing to write, but of course you can always pause the video yourself and rewind it if you need to. So what we're going to talk a little bit about is how structure complements function. So the structure of something is going to dictate its function, and I'll get into a little bit more of that in a little while. We'll talk about the levels of organization, the functions necessary for life, the survival needs of the body, homeostasis and its significance, and then we'll go over some anatomical terms that are used to describe the body in anatomy and physiology and just in medicine in general. And so the definition of anatomy is it is the study of the body structures and their relationship to one another. So we're just describing body structures with anatomy. With physiology, we're going to describe exactly how those body parts work. So you'll see I'll give you a diagram that has a bunch of labeled parts on it, depending on which body system we're working with. And then we'll talk about how that body system actually works. So the anatomy is the parts, the physiology is how those parts work. So what a structure can do depends on its specific form. For example, the cells that line the respiratory tract are very thin and they're almost plate shaped, so they're very like disc-like. The reason why the structure of the cell is conducive to the function of the lungs is because everyone knows, and we will talk about respiratory system a little bit at the end of the course, gas exchange has to occur in the lungs. So the form, the thin disc-like cells fit its function that gas has to exchange across. Oxygen goes in and carbon dioxide goes out. The structure dictates function. All right, we have our levels of structural organization. So we could talk in a traditional anatomy class, atoms and compounds and elements and stuff like that would be discussed, how those make up chemicals, then how chemicals make up cells. We are going to talk a little bit about biochemistry tomorrow and the cell tomorrow and the next day. But this is the level, the hierarchy of organization. So cells make tissues. Tissues, when they become a functional organ, they make up an organ. Organs together make up organ systems, and all of the organ systems together make up an organism. So if you're not done writing, you may want to pause right there. All right, and now we're going to review each organ system. We are not going to be able to cover every single one of these in this class. I've picked very specific ones that we're going to cover. Integumentary. Integumentary is the hair, skin, and nails, and is going to protect the body from injury. So a lot of people don't usually think of their skin like this coat of skin that you're in right now is actually its own organ. Pretty fascinating, I would say, if I had to go back and do a different career, if I did end up going to medical school like I originally planned and didn't get caught up in having so many kids, I would have definitely wanted to be a dermatologist. And we are going to cover integumentary system on Friday. Skeletal system, we are not going to cover in this class. It's just one of those ones that I don't find as interesting as the others. It's important, just not quite as interesting, so I did eliminate that from this summer class. But what it does is protects and supports the organs, provides a framework for muscles. So a lot of people don't think of the skeletal system as involved in movement, but if you really think about it, you wouldn't be able to move if your muscles were not attached to your skeletal system. So one of the main functions of the skeletal system is for movement. All right, the muscular system maintains posture. What some students find surprising is that the muscular system is involved in producing heat for the body. So that's one of those ones that's kind of interesting, I think. And it allows manipulation of the environment and is also part of movement. So that's muscular system. Nervous system involves the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves. So we are not going to cover muscular system in this class because I cover it in AP Bio, and I'm hoping everyone will take that class. It's okay if you don't, but I do cover that, so I didn't want to duplicate. Since I have some students who have taken AP Bio and many who are going to, I'm not going to duplicate that here. Nervous system is something I do talk about in AP Bio, but it is so important and so interesting that I am going to duplicate that. So I want to talk about that a little bit more and get into a little bit more of the details here in this class. But the nervous system is going to be your fast-acting control system. It is going to regulate your internal environment and is basically going to be that control center that connects to all of the other body systems and makes sure that everything is in balance and that you are staying alive. Endocrine system is one that I am going to cover, but we are going to focus on sex determination and the reproductive organs and the reproductive hormones. I'm really going to put a focus on hormones, and I think you're going to find that really interesting. That's the last one that we're going to cover, and the activity that we're going to do, it's a little bit controversial, but I think you're going to find it very interesting and very relevant. All right, so the endocrine system is going to be involved in secreting hormones. Basically, anything that doesn't fit into all the other body systems just gets kind of lumped into endocrine system. So if it's a gland, and these are a list of all the glands, and it releases a hormone, which is a chemical signal that travels through the blood to another part of the body, it's just going to be lumped into endocrine system. I love endocrine system. All right, cardiovascular system is one that we are going to cover. We're going to cover the blood and the chemistry, a little bit of chemistry of the blood, blood typing, and blood vessels. And then we're going to talk about the parts of the heart and exactly how blood gets pumped through the body. So cardiovascular system is going to be your transport organ system, transporting blood, oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, and waste. So we're going to spend 2 days on cardiovascular system. All right, lymphatic system and immune system go together. A lot of students don't know that you actually have this other circulatory system going on with your lymph nodes and with the lymphatic fluid. What lymphatic fluid is going to involve is white blood cells, also known as lymphocytes, and white blood cells are involved in immunity and fighting disease and fighting infection, viral or bacterial or parasite or fungal, any kind of infection, any kind of foreign invader in the body. I do talk a lot about immune system in my other class, and so I have actually chosen to eliminate immune system from this class. That might disappoint some people, but if you are taking AP Bio, you will get that. I just had to eliminate some things, so that was my rationale is, well, if I cover it in this class, and I've compared my roster for anatomy and for my AP Bio class next year, and there's a lot of overlap. So I have decided to go ahead and just keep that special for that class. All right, the respiratory system we are going to cover in this class, and that's going to involve the lungs, the trachea, the bronchus, and we are going to talk a little bit about lung capacity. You're going to make what's called a spirometer to measure your lung capacity, and that should be pretty fun. And what's going to basically occur in the respiratory system is bringing in oxygen and removing carbon dioxide, so gas exchange that occurs in the lungs. Respiratory system. Digestive system is one that I did not cover because usually in Ms. Nichols' class in 7th grade, you guys cover that. From what I understand. So digestive system is just breaking down of food and absorbing nutrients. Urinary system, also known as the excretory system, It's going to eliminate waste. We are going to talk about the kidney and filtration of blood just very briefly when we discuss transport across the cell membrane and osmosis. The urinary system is involving the kidney and urine. The reproductive system, we're going to discuss the testes and the ovaries and the hormones that get released from there. So that's involved in obviously the production of offspring, and it is what makes males have certain traits and females have certain traits. So we are going to discuss that last. All right, so those are all of the organ systems, and I kind of touched on which ones we're going to cover and not cover. So what is necessary for life for humans? I'm just going to go through this list really quick because you guys pretty much already know most of these. It's pretty intuitive up to this point. Maintaining boundaries, inside versus outside. If you didn't maintain a boundary with the outside, it would probably just melt, or anything could enter into your body and you would have infection. It would just be a disaster. So maintaining boundaries physically. Obviously, mentally, we need to do that too, but I'm talking about the physical boundaries. Movement, internal and external movement, so that you can get from place to place, so that nutrients and oxygen and carbon dioxide can move through your body, so lots of movement going on. Responsiveness, sense changes and respond. So when I think of that, I think of your thermoreceptors that you have all over your skin. So if something is hot, you'll move away from it. Digestion, breaking down food. Metabolism, we all need metabolism in order to live. It's a totality of all the chemical reactions in the body. Excretion, we need to remove waste. If we didn't remove waste, it would accumulate, especially it would accumulate in the brain, and it would cause lots of problems. I'm going to talk a little bit about ammonia accumulation in the brain when we talk about the kidney. We need reproduction, otherwise our species would cease to exist. We need reproduction of just individual cells, so cell division, also known as mitosis. And we also need reproduction of the entire organism in order to pass our genetics along and to keep our species alive. And then lastly, growth, so increase in size. All right, you are going to fill in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 survival needs, nutrients. And when we talk about nutrients, we mean vitamins, minerals, all of those things that you would find in your food that appear that up to this point in your life, you know, you've been conditioned to believe that they're healthy. So vitamins, minerals. And when you take a traditional cell bio or AP bio class, you will find out what is it about calcium? How does calcium help? How does vitamin A help? Well, really what nutrients are going to do is they're going to aid in the function of enzymes, and they're going to stabilize the active site of enzymes. And so I'm not going to ask you questions about that, but just in case you were wondering, I do go over that in my biology classes. We need oxygen, and the reason we need oxygen is because oxygen is involved in the production of ATP, also known as energy. So definitely need oxygen for cellular respiration to occur so that ATP can be made, and ATP is needed to do work in the body, any kind of work like muscle contraction, glands releasing hormones, stuff like that. We need water. Water is involved in all of the chemical reactions that require hydrolysis. So the breakdown of things require water. Normal body temperature. If we didn't maintain a normal body temperature, all of our proteins would denature, meaning they unfold. And in a traditional biology class, you would get a little bit more about protein folding. I'm going to talk a little bit about protein folding tomorrow because it is so important, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why you need a stable body temperature to maintain the shape of your proteins. All right, atmospheric pressure, you need a certain pressure. All right, and that is it. So if you didn't have if you had too much pressure, you would be crushed. If you didn't have enough pressure, your chemical reactions wouldn't occur the way that they need to occur. All right, so those are the 5 survival needs. Okay, next topic is homeostasis. Homeostasis just means that you are maintaining a stable balance or stable internal conditions. And so the way that homeostasis is achieved is you have a receptor where information is going to come in, or it's going to be received. That information from your external or even internal environment is then going to be processed through the control center. And so your control center is going to involve your brain or your brain stem, or even sometimes your spinal cord. And then the effector is going to be the response. So let me give you an example. You have thermoreceptors on your skin, and let's say you touch a hot stove. The input of information would be heat, extreme heat. That would then be sent through a neuron up to a control center. Now, the control center in this example, touching a hot stove, is not going to involve your actual high intelligent part of your brain. This is going to involve a very low level part of your brain because it is such a basic survival need to stay away from things that are too hot. So it would just get integrated into your brainstem, and then it would send a signal down to your hand, and your effector would be your hand, and the response would be moving it away from the heat. Okay, so that's one way homeostasis can be achieved when it involves touching a hot stove. Another way it could be achieved is, let's say you have a fever, or no, let's just say not a fever. Let's say that you're outside and it's really hot outside. I'm going to use temperature again, except this will be an internal temperature change. So if you have an internal temperature change, it's really hot outside, that information gets sent to your hypothalamus, the part of your brain called the hypothalamus, and then the effector response would be for you to sweat so that you could cool off. All right, and so that kind of leads me into what negative feedback is. Negative feedback is what achieves homeostasis. So to put it simplistically, negative feedback is more gets you less, or less gets you more. So it's a way to keep kind of in the middle, to keep everything in moderation, keep everything in equilibrium. So negative feedback functions with body temperature. The hotter you get, the more your body's going to try to cool you down. Or the colder you get, the more your body's going to try to heat you back up. So it just goes in the opposite direction in order to achieve that balance. Same with breathing rate. If you don't have enough oxygen, so the less oxygen you have, higher your breathing rate's going to get. And then the same with blood sugar levels. The lower your blood sugar levels get, the more your body's going to try to do something to increase blood sugar levels. So that's called negative feedback, and negative feedback is going to achieve homeostasis. Positive feedback is not going to achieve homeostasis. Positive feedback means more gets you more. And there's only actually three examples of that. More gets you more. During labor, contractions of the uterus when a woman is in labor is going to increase. So the more contractions she has, the more contractions she's going to have. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. The more the uterus contracts, the more the uterus is going to contract. There's no, oh, the uterus is contracting too much, let's kind of slow it down a little bit. No, it just ramps up until the baby's born. Same thing with lactation. When a woman is breastfeeding, the more the baby tries to eat, the more milk a woman is going to produce. So more gets you more. And then the other one is blood clotting. And so I will go over that example of blood clotting in just a second. All right, so labor contractions and blood clotting are positive feedback. Okay, and then when a person has a disease, that's going to involve an homeostatic imbalance. And we're going to talk about lots of diseases in this class. And I'm not going to go there. I will discuss that tomorrow. All right, so this just gives you a visual of that balance that we're trying to achieve. A stimulus is going to be received by a receptor. The information is going to be integrated into control center, and then you're going to have the output of information and then a response. Right here I have just a few examples of some things that we've already talked about and how balance can be achieved. This can be kind of a confusing picture, but if you just start right here and you follow it along, it's kind of what I talked about. So temperature goes up in the body, and then the afferent pathway is where the information is received. The efferent pathway is where information is given. Go ahead and sweat body to cool it down. All right. On the opposite, a really cold day, the afferent pathway is where the receptors of the skin and inside the body are going to send a signal to the control center, hey, it's cold. Then the control center is going to send a message down the efferent pathway, to the muscles to say shiver, so that heat can be created. Right, so hopefully you kind of understand that. Afferent means It's the information that's given to the brain. Efferent is the information that the brain gives to the body to try to correct the problem. Right? So this involves a negative feedback loop. Positive feedback is, remember, more gets you more. So let's say you are bleeding. A positive feedback mechanism would be platelets are going to be released and they're going to form a plug. And then the more platelets there are, the more chemicals that are released that attract more platelets. This just ensures that you don't bleed to death. So we're really glad that blood clotting is a positive feedback loop, unless it gets out of whack and can cause things like heart attacks and pretty bad problems. So we don't want this to get out of control. But that is an example of positive feedback. All right, so that's homeostasis, negative feedback, positive feedback. If you have any questions on that, you definitely can ask me during Zoom today or during Zoom tomorrow. Let's go over a little bit about anatomical positions. I am not going to name every one of these positions. I am not going to have you memorize those. You are going to use this image right here to just do a little exploration with the drag and drop activity. If you are planning on pursuing a career in medicine, eventually you'll need to probably memorize most of these, and so I have given you a tool, which is the drag and drop activity. It sounds like I'm saying dragon, but I'm not. It's drag and drop, and it's a great activity that could help you memorize it. You don't have to memorize it now, but just so you know, if you keep this course manual, you'll have that tool and that resource available to you to help you memorize these words if you need it later on. Hopefully you can keep up with this manual though. Right, so these are just all of the terms that are going to describe the different parts of the body. And like I said, I'm not going to go over all of those. I'm going to let you do the drag and drop activity to explore those. We also have what are called directional terms. And so this would be used when you're doing a dissection, when you're studying the human body, and it would also be used when someone is doing potentially surgery. So anytime you hear the word superior, it's going to involve closest to the head. Inferior is going to involve away from the head. Ventral is going to be front. So I would circle that word front. Dorsal, and so I'm just giving you kind of the shortcut so you don't have to read through this whole thing. So superior is toward head, inferior away from head, ventral is the front, dorsal is the back, and we have words for words in biology. So ventral and anterior actually mean the same thing. Ventral, anterior, front, dorsal, posterior, back. Medial is going to be the midline. Lateral is going to be away from the midline. And just to make things a little bit more confusing, intermediate is going to be between medial and lateral. So if to kind of give you a reference, the collarbone is going to be considered something that's intermediate. So like I said, you don't have to memorize these. You just need to reference them for your drag and drop activity and for the little quiz you take tomorrow. But just so you know, all of these words do exist and they are used in medicine. Proximal and distal, these ones are a little bit confusing. So proximal is a way to describe two body parts in reference to each other. The more proximal something is, the closer it is to the body trunk. For example, so here's the body trunk. You would say the elbow is proximal to the wrist, meaning the elbow compared to the wrist is closer to the body trunk. All right. So another example for that, you could say the knee is proximal to the ankle because your knee is closer to your body trunk than your ankle would be. Distal is the opposite. So it would be which body part, when you compare two to each other, is actually further away from the body trunk. So you would say the knee is distal to the thigh. So if you think about the knee, further away from the body trunk than the thigh. And then you would say the wrist is distal to the elbow. Those two are kind of confusing. Superficial just means towards or at the body's surface. So you would say that the skin is superficial to the muscles. It's more towards the surface. And then the opposite of that would be deep, away from the body surface. So you would say the skeletal muscles are deeper than the skin, or the lungs are deep to the skin. All right, so just some comparative words. And then we have a couple of regional terms. These are your big regional terms. Axial means the main part of the body, which involves the head, neck, and trunk. And that's in purple. Or your notes say it's in blue, but it looks purple to me. And then your appendicular would be your limbs that are attached to the axial. So axial would be kind of the central part of your body. Appendicular, and it kind of sounds like appendage, would be the limbs that are attached to the axis part of the body. So you just fill those into the blank there. All right. The body can be cut and sectioned along planes. So this is important when you're doing dissections. The sagittal plane is going to divide the left and the right. So I'll give you just a minute to write that down. The sagittal plane divides the left and the right. So if you're dissecting, what you would do is just go straight through the middle, and you would divide the left and the right. So medial or mid-sagittal actually means exactly down the middle. Parasagittal would mean, so let's say you're cutting from you're separating left from right, but you're not going exactly down the middle of the body. You're kind of going down the side. That would be called parasagittal. All right, the frontal or coronal plane is going to divide the anterior and posterior. So remember what anterior and posterior meant? Let me go way back here. Sorry. Anterior is the front, posterior is the back. So if you can kind of visualize, if I'm not cutting straight down the middle to separate left and right, I'm going to turn the other way and cut down, sort of like if you were dissecting a human body. Let's say you turn the human body where you are facing the person's, the side of their arm, the side of their body, you're looking straight at their arm, you would go down the head and you would cut them that way. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Transverse horizontal is going to divide into superior and inferior. So this would basically be if you just cut right at the abdomen and the top of the body and the bottom of the body were separated from each other. So that's a transverse or horizontal plane. And then oblique would be diagonal cuts between horizontal and vertical. So if you were making diagonal cuts, that would be called oblique. So many words, my goodness. All right, so frontal section, this would be a frontal divide. So if you see the second one right here, a frontal divide would be, if you look at this plane right here. So this is actually a really good way to visualize it. So if you cut straight this way, cut all the way down, so you would have half of the body front and then you'd have the back. And what you can look at when you do dissections like this, you can look at the lungs a little bit better. Sorry, I went to the wrong page. You can look at the lungs a little bit better. You can really look into a cross section of the organs, the heart, the spleen, the stomach, and arms. All right, a transverse section. Can I move my transverse would be if you cut right here, straight right here. So remember, if you cut through the torso, you have your superior and your inferior. Right, and then a mid-sagittal plane, so a median. This is that first one. These actually are kind of out of order, and I'm sorry for doing so many clicking. I'm trying to move the frame, but it's not working. And I don't have time to edit every single lecture, so if I mess up, sorry. I mean, it's kind of like if I was standing in front of you, because I'm definitely not perfect when I lecture in class either. All right, so median would be cutting down this way, so you can look at the left and the right side. So I think these pictures kind of help a little bit just visualize what those words mean. All right, so this is a little exercise, which plane is shown below. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to look at these and to try to answer them on your own. So I'm going to stop the video here. You can stop right here and just kind of fill these out. So which of the four would each one of these be? And then I'll come back in just a second and I'll give you the answers. Okay, so if you really tried to name which plane is shown for each of these below, you would see it's kind of difficult with some of these organs. If you just looked at the human body being cut, those ones are pretty easy, but with an organ, it can be kind of difficult. So for the kidney, it looks to me like this is cut into a left and a right. So I'm calling this a sagittal plane. For the brain, this brain is actually cut. It's showing one side of the brain. So this one was actually cut straight down the middle, left and right. This would also be sagittal. This is a thigh, and this is actually the bone, and then you see muscle and you see a little bit of fat. So this one was actually cut as a transverse. So you would have your inferior and your your superior and your inferior. So this was a transverse. This one was a little bit difficult. This is actually if you cut the top of the heart off and you looked down into the heart. So this would have been a kind of a tough one. So this one right here would also be transverse. This one right here looks like you are looking straight into a person and that the front section of the person was actually cut off. So I'm saying that this would be a frontal plane right here. And then on this last one, it looks like the body was cut into left and right, and you are just well, you're looking into one side of the body. Okay, and so I would call this one sagittal. If you had trouble with this exercise, that is totally okay. It is extremely difficult to explain these terms through a PowerPoint without being in front of you and actually cutting something in front of you. So I think what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to find something to cut. I'm going to get various pieces of fruit and I'll draw a face on the front and the back on the back, and then I'll actually cut those for you to try to explain these a little bit better. I think that would help. All right, we are almost done. Last thing is body cavities. We have two body cavities, the dorsal body cavity and the ventral body cavity. And so you can see right here, the dorsal body cavity, if you can look at my cursor, is going to include cranial, spine, and vertebrate. So cranial, spine, and vertebrate is going to be your dorsal cavity. If you can kind of see my cursor doing this, dorsal. And then your ventral body cavity is going to be all of this. It's going to involve your lungs, your heart, your trachea, and your esophagus. There are other cavities that you're going to look at with your drag and drop. So hopefully you didn't get too overwhelmed by all of these words and all of these planes and these cavities and ventral, dorsal, anterior, posterior. These are just a lot of words with over a short period of time, which is why I'm not going to have you memorize any of them. But I just wanted you to be exposed and for you to know that they exist, and that if you do move on into medicine and to anatomy later on, these would be words that you would probably be expected to know. All right, let me know if you have any questions over this lecture either today, or you can save them for our Zoom tomorrow. But that is all I have for you for an introduction to anatomy and the orientation of the body. I will see you guys later.